Hello, my name is Galina Kurdina. I live in Toronto, Ontario, and I am a victim of fascist mind control experimentation. Today I would like to talk to you about MKUltra and disgusting role of CIA in it, and about tight connection of CIA and Canadian government. Introduction. Project MKUltra was a human experimentation program designed and undertaken by the American Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, to develop procedures and identify drugs that could be used during interrogations to weaken individuals and force confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture. The program has been widely condemned as a violation of individual rights and a disgusting example of the abuse of power by CIA, with critics highlighting its disregard for informed consent and its corrosive impact on democratic principles. Project MKUltra began in 1953 and was halted in 1973. MKUltra used numerous methods to manipulate its subjects' mental states and brain functions, such as the covert administration of high doses of psychoactive drugs, especially LSD, and other chemicals without the subject's consent. Additionally, other methods beyond chemical compounds were used, including electroshocks, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse, and other forms of torture. Project MKUltra was organized through the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence and coordinated with the United States Army Biological Warfare Laboratories. The program engaged in illegal activities, including the use of US and Canadian citizens as unwitting test subjects. Background of MKUltra. During the early 1940s, Nazi scientists working in the concentration camps of Auschwitz and Dachau during World War II conducted interrogation experiments on human subjects. Substances such as barbiturates, morphine derivatives, and hallucinogens such as mescaline were employed in experiments conducted on Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, Jewish, and other prisoners of war. The aim of these experiments was to develop a truth serum which would eliminate the will of the person examined. The CIA project was a continuation of these earlier Nazi experiments, as evidenced by MKUltra's use of mescaline on unwitting subjects, replicating previous Nazi experiments conducted at Dachau. American interest in drug-related interrogation experiments began in 1943, when the Office of Strategic Services began developing a truth drug that would produce an inhibited truthfulness in an interrogated person. In 1947, the United States Navy initiated Project Cheetah, an interrogation program which saw the first testing of LSD on human subjects. In 1950, the Central Intelligence Agency initiated a series of interrogation projects involving human subjects, beginning with the launch of Project Bluebird, officially renamed Project Artichoke, on August 20, 1951. The objective of Artichoke was to determine whether an individual could be made to involuntarily perform an act of attempted assassination. Morphine, mescaline, and LSD were all administered on unknowing CIA agents in an attempt to produce amnesia in the subjects. Aims and leadership. The Project MKUltra was headed by Sidney Gottlieb, but began on the order of CIA Director Alan Dulles on April 13, 1953. Its aim was to develop mind-controlling drugs for use against the Soviet bloc in response to alleged Soviet, Chinese, and North Korean use of mind control techniques on American prisoners of war during the Korean War. The CIA wanted to use similar methods on their own captives and was interested in manipulating foreign leaders with such techniques, for example, Fidel Castro. It often conducted experiments without the subject's knowledge or consent. In some cases, academic researchers were funded through grants from CIA front organizations, but were unaware that CIA was using their work for their purposes. The project attempted to produce a perfect truth serum for interrogating suspected Soviet spies during the Cold War and to explore other possibilities of mind control. The project MKUltra began during a period of what English journalist Rupert Cornwell described as paranoia at the CIA, when the US had lost its nuclear monopoly and fear of communism was at its height. CIA counterintelligence chief James Jesus Angleton believed that a mole had penetrated the organization at the highest levels. The agency poured millions of dollars into studies examining ways to influence and control the mind and enhance its ability to extract information from resistant subjects during interrogation. Some historians assert that one goal of MKUltra and related CIA projects was to create a Manchurian candidate-style subject. MKUltra, MKDelta materials were also used for harassment, discrediting, and disabling purposes. Experiments on Americans. CIA documents suggest that they investigated chemical, biological, and radiological methods of mind control as part of MKUltra. During a hearing by the Senate Health Subcommittee, a testimony by the deputy director of the CIA stated that over 30 American institutions and universities were involved in the experimentation program of testing drugs on unknowing citizens at all social levels, high and low, Native Americans and foreign. Several of these tests involved the issuing of LSD to unaware subjects in social situations. The army was subject to the testing of LSD as well. Another technique investigated was the intravenous administration of barbiturate into one arm and amphetamine into the other. The barbiturates were released into the person's fist, and as soon as the person began to fall asleep, the amphetamines were released. Other experiments involved heroin, morphine, mescaline, and other psychoactive drugs and alcohol. Declassified MKUltra documents indicate they studied hypnosis in the early 1950s. Experiments on Canadians. The CIA exported experiments to Canada when they recruited Scottish psychiatrist Donald Cameron, creator of the psychic driving concept, which the CIA found interesting. Cameron had been hoping to correct schizophrenia by erasing existing memories and reprogramming the psyche. He commuted from Albany, New York to Montreal every week to work at the Allen Memorial Institute of McGill University to carry out MKUltra experiments there. In addition to LSD, Cameron also experimented with various paralytic drugs as well as electroconvulsive therapy at 30 to 40 times the normal power. His driving experiments consisted of putting subjects into drug-induced comas for weeks at a time, up to 3 months in one case, while playing tape loops of noise and repetitive statements. His experiments were often carried out on patients who entered the Institute for common problems such as anxiety disorders or depression, many of whom suffered permanent effects from his actions. His treatments resulted in victims' urinary incontinence, amnesia, forgetting how to talk, forgetting their parents, and thinking their interrogators were their parents. Naomi Klein argues in her book The Shock Doctrine that Cameron's research and his contribution to the MKUltra project was not about mind control or brainwashing, but about designing a scientifically based system for extracting information from resistant sources, in other words, torture. Stripped of its bizarre excesses, Dr. Cameron's experiments, building upon Donald Habb's earlier breakthrough, laid the scientific foundation for the CIA's two-stage psychological torture method, referring to first creating a state of disorientation in the subject and then creating a situation of self-inflicted discomfort in which the disoriented subject can alleviate pain by capitulating. During this era, Cameron became known worldwide as the first chairman of the World Psychiatric Association, as well as president of both the American Psychiatric Association and the Canadian Psychiatric Association. Cameron was also a member of the Nuremberg Medical Tribunal in 1946-1947. Secret detention camps in areas under American control in early 1950s in Europe and East Asia, mostly Japan, West Germany, and the Philippines, the CIA created secret detention centers, black sites, so that the US could avoid criminal prosecution. The CIA captured people suspected of being enemy agents and other people it deemed expendable to undertake various types of torture and human experimentation on them. The prisoners were interrogated while being administered psychoactive drugs, electroshocked, and subjected to extremes of temperature, sensory isolation, and the like, to develop a better understanding of how to destroy and to control human minds. Revelation. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Holmes ordered all MKUltra files destroyed. Pursuant to this order, most CIA documents regarding the project were destroyed, making a full investigation of MKUltra impossible. In December 1974, the New York Times alleged that the CIA had conducted illegal domestic activities, including experiments on the American citizens during the 1960s. That report prompted investigations by the United States Congress in the form of the Church Committee and by a commission known as the Rockefeller Commission that looked into the illegal domestic activities of the CIA, the FBI, and intelligence-related agencies of the military. In the summer of 1975, Congressional Church Committee reports and the Presidential Rockefeller Commission report revealed to the public for the first time that the CIA and the Department of Defense had conducted experiments on both unwitting and cognizant human subjects as part of an extensive program to find out how to influence and control human behavior through the use of psychoactive drugs such as LSD and mescaline and other chemical, biological, and psychological means. Sorry for my mistakes because I experience forced speech. They also revealed that at least one subject, Frank Olson, had died after administration of LSD. The Congressional Church Committee conducted that prior consent was obviously not obtained from any of the subjects. Following the recommendations of the Church Committee, President Gerald Ford in 1976 issued the first executive order on intelligence activities, which, among other things, prohibited experimentation with drugs on human subjects, except with the informed consent, in writing and witnessed by a disinterested party, of which such human subject, and in accordance with the guidelines issued by the National Commission. Subsequent orders by Presidents Carter and Reagan expanded the directive to apply to any human experimentation. In Canada, the issue took much longer to surface, becoming widely known in 1984 on the CBC News show The Fifth Estate. It was learned that not only had the CIA funded Cameron's efforts, but also that the Canadian government was fully aware of this and had later provided another $500,000 in funding to continue the experiments. This revelation largely derailed efforts by the Canadian victims to sue the CIA as their US counterparts had, and the Canadian government eventually settled out of court for $100,000 to each of the 127 victims. Legal issues involving informed consent. Once again, legal issues involving informed consent. The revelations about the CIA and the Army prompt a number of subjects or their survivors to file lawsuits against the federal government for conducting experiments without informed consent. Although the government aggressively and sometimes successfully sought to avoid legal liability, several plaintiffs did receive compensation through court order, out-of-order settlement, or acts of Congress. Frank Olson's family received $750,000 by a special act of Congress, and both President Ford and CIA Director William Colby met with the Olson's family to apologize publicly. Previously, the CIA and the Army had actively and successfully sought to withhold incriminating information, even as they secretly provided compensation to the families. One subject of Army drug experimentation, James Stanley, an Army sergeant, brought an important, albeit unsuccessful suit. In 1987, the Supreme Court affirmed this defense in a 5-4 decision that dismissed Stanley's case. The majority argued that a test for liability that depends on the extent to which particular suits would call into question military discipline and decision-making would itself require judicial inquiry into and hence intrusion upon military matters. In dissent, Justice William Brennan argued that the need to preserve military discipline should not protect the government from liability and punishment for serious violations of constitutional rights. His words: the medical trials at Nuremberg in 1947 deeply impressed upon the world that experimentation with unknowing human subjects is morally and legally unacceptable. The United States Military Tribunal established the Nuremberg Code as a standard against which to judge German scientists who experimented with human subjects. In defiance of this principle, military intelligence officials began surreptitiously testing chemical and biological materials, including LSD. More information was revealed in the Canadian CBC documentary series The Fifth Estate. In March 1980, they released a first episode about Project MKUltra, which held the testimony of 2 Canadian patients who had undergone the treatment, speaking out for the first time. The second episode, released in 2017, focuses on the present-day struggle of the victims to receive compensation, the hindrances made to prevent them from speaking out about their experiences, and the efforts of the CIA and Canadian government together to keep their involvement hidden. Mentioned in particular are 1988 class action settlement made by the victims against CIA, which they won, receiving $67,000 each, and a 1992 compensation from the Canadian government, in which 77 individuals received $100,000 each, but signed away their right to sue the government or the hospital. This compensation didn't extend to 250 other victims denied for not being tortured enough, applied too late, or because they couldn't produce medical records. To this day, neither the Canadian government nor the CIA have issued formal apologies for their involvement and funding of Project MKUltra or the Montreal experiments. In 2017, the Canadian government reached an out-of-court settlement with the daughter of one of the patients, paying $100,000 in exchange for dropping the legal case and signing a non-disclosure agreement which would prevent her from talking about the settlement. Once again, sorry for my mistakes because I experienced forced speech. Thank you for your attention and support. Bye.